All right. So project schedule. So how do we actually do a project schedule? Assuming that you've got your scope defined and you have your WBS, here are the things that you do to start developing your project schedule. That schedule determines the time ordering. A project schedule determines the time ordering of the task, helps identify resources or resource conflicts, i.e. having the same person scheduled to do two different tasks at the same time. It's usually not a good idea. And also gives you some confidence that you can complete your project on time. The that the schedule is usually a very useful tool for making certain that your project is moving forward on time. So the following steps: get your WBS established. And we already know before your WBS, you've got to get your goal, objectives, and requirements defined. What tasks depend on what? You need to define that task dependency or the precedence of tasks. What time lags are there? Roll up your time estimates from your bottom WBS. Assign people to specific tasks who are responsible for these things. And if you find out that there's conflicts, resolve that. What are your milestone dates? You know several of them already. There's a PDR document, a CDR document, an FRR document and presentation. There's going to be a thermal vac test in April. You know what those, excuse me, you know what those requirements and milestones are, and you have to take those into account. Implementing a trade-off if the schedule is not acceptable. Those are the kinds of steps that you go into scheduling process. There are several things that can happen that can seriously impact your schedule. So for example, is the WBS complete or incomplete? If you don't have all your tasks defined or understood, that can really screw you up, right? Do you have accurate work package time estimate on it? How much dependency do you have on the task? If everything is sequential, then you're going to have one kind of a schedule. However, if you can make things run in parallel, that will help reduce the total calendar time that you have to go through in order to achieve your schedule. What about personnel resources? An individual cannot focus on more than one task at a time. There is no such thing as multitasking. It doesn't exist. In fact, most neural studies of brain function have shown that if you that your brain basically is a good switcher. It will switch between different kinds of things. So if you're sitting there studying, listening to music, what your brain is actually doing is that it's switching between your attention between your music and the studying. So you're actually spending less time studying than if you just turned off the music and went. There is no such thing as multitasking. You also have personnel which will have different effectiveness. Some people can work 40 hours a week. Some can be limited to only 10 hours a week. Probably you as students, the maximum that the institution would allow you to work is 20 hours a week. So anything that takes 40 hours, a normal work week to do, a student working 20 hours a week would take 2 calendar weeks. So those are things that can affect your schedule as we progress through here. The kinds of things that are essential for you to produce a schedule is that complete WBS. Did I ever mention that you need to have a good WBS and requirements and objectives set and identified? that WBS is already probably going to have some kind of time ordering already identified in it. And that will help you order things as you go with it. You need to determine what I'm calling here task precedent. Which items depend on which previous task. So the example I give you is that you can't install a sensor until you have that sensor in hand. So it's got to be specified, ordered, and delivered. So all those tasks, specifying the sensor, ordering the sensor, and having the sensor ship, are precedents to installing the sensor. You need to take those things into account. How much of your schedule and task can be done in parallel? Certainly, if you have 2 to 3 people involved with your team, then each person can assume a collection of tasks, right? So many times you might have a team with a mechanical and an electrical and a software person. So obviously you can do the tasks associated with mechanical, electrical, and software in parallel. So you need to determine how much of your tasks in your project can be done in parallel and how much has to be sequential. Identify your milestone events. You know where they are for HASC. You probably will have to determine other ones within your own project schedule and identify those as fixed dates. Time lags. Figure out what your time lags are. Shipping. You can't necessarily get everything you need instantly. You're going to have to order something, and it's going to take some time to ship. So you may not have that. You're going to have some downtime in waiting for parts to come in. So that's a lag, a shipping lag. Holidays, right? Mardi Gras is coming up. You might have a spring break. There's other things like that. You need to take that into account. Exams, time off, etc. You need to put those into your schedule and have that information when you have. There are a number of different software packages that can be used for doing your scheduling. We talk about Microsoft Project, but there are other freeware, and Project Libre, I believe, is the one that we talk about a bit that you can use, and they all run roughly about the same in it. So in one of these project scheduling software packages like Microsoft Project, you basically enter the task from your WBS and establish your tree structure relationship so that your lower level tasks are clearly associated with the higher level. Put in your shipping times and other lags as tasks in the schedule. All right, so that you can identify which of these things are going to be affected by the lags. Enter the time estimates for these lower level ones and the predecessors, so which ones depend upon which. So for example, when we're talking about these lags or shipping time, ordering would precede shipping, and installing would precede what would follow the shipping. So these would be precedents. You'd identify that. All right. So there are some of these programs like Project, etc. You can put things in there to take into account general time, like you put in a holiday schedule or your exam schedules or other things like that, so that would automatically take that into account. And we'll go through a short example of how Microsoft Project works right after this lecture. So once you produce your initial schedule in your project, you now want to sort of put in your personnel resources and assign these tasks to specific people. you need to take into account effects with limited personal availability and try to improve the parallelism of your tasks. And once you go through this with your personnel, you need to look for any conflicts or problems and correct that. Can you in fact make your milestones? If not, you got to figure out why not and do the appropriate adjustments, right? Did you have a bad estimate in the work package? Do you have too many things sequential? You know, what is it, right? And you need to fix that. Personnel availability, right? I can't emphasize this too much. You need to be able to take this kind of stuff into effect. You cannot work on multiple tasks at the same time. You can only assign an individual a task at any given time, right? And that's the way that you need to work it in the project. Now, during a given day, that individual may work on task A and then task B. That's fine, but it's got to be clear that it is done sequentially in that. There are some tools like resource leveling that occurs in things like Microsoft Project, and there's some automation that can work. You need to be careful about using some of this stuff because you can get really screwed up real badly. My general advice on any of these things is that you need to have version control with even things like Microsoft Project or your scheduling software, and you need to save often and then copy your file and rename it to be another version, and then move on from there and keep on doing that so you can always go back. So when and if you screw it all up, 7 ways to Sunday, you can go back to the previous version and start again. So version control and keep that. So personnel effectiveness, right? Time on task and calendar time are two different things, right? So time on task requires 40 hours of work. Normal, so if you got a task that needs 40 hours of work, then a normal 100% efficient worker will need 1 week of calendar time to do it. If that worker can only focus on the task for 10 hours per week, then 4 calendar weeks are going to be needed. Okay, need to make certain that you take that into account and have that automated. So here's just a slide on this personnel resources in Microsoft Project. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can look at that if you get interested in it. The more that you can schedule things in parallel with your tasks, the better off you're going to be. Once you develop that WBS in your task definitions, you may see things that end up being parallel, like if you're making duplicates or fabricating duplicates of the same design, that could be run in parallel. You also need to take into account, advantage of natural timelines. So for example, if you've got, some device or instrument being shipped, well, that's sort of downtime. So that person can go work on something else. It's just a natural lag. And so if you fill up that time with work, that's great. Okay. Make certain that your schedule is consistent with your known constraints. Are you in fact making your milestones? All right. If you are you scheduling work when nobody is around? Right. You gotta be careful about that. Make certain that it makes sense. Right. Is the total amount of work shown in the schedule consistent with the total time personnel have committed to work? Right. If you end up having 30 hours of task time in a week with 2 persons who can commit to only 10 hours a week, that's going to be a problem. You're overcommitting those personnel. And then I've already mentioned about making certain that you make your major milestone, and make certain that you end up your project in the expected time with duration. You know, if you do the scheduling and your WBS and you end up you know, calculating that your payload is going to be ready until August, that's a problem, right? So you got to check for this consistency. Once you get all this going, then the schedule, et cetera, can use you can use that to track your time. Are you on track for making your milestones on that? When you, as you go into you know, through, you know, every day or so, you can estimate on your task what percentage of that task is actually done. And then for something like Microsoft Project, it'll actually show you where you are relative to the current date. So are you behind? Are you ahead? You know, which tasks need to have more effort done, et cetera. So it's a useful tool to be able to monitor the progress on your job. If you are running into problems, then there's a couple things that you need to consider doing. Descoping the project, eliminating tasks. So you originally proposed that you're going to be integrating 5 sensors. You're behind. So you can drop down to 2 sensors or 1 sensor, right? So that eliminates a bunch of tasks that you weren't going to be able to get done anyway, right? You got some spare personnel kicking around that is just sort of sitting around. You can increase the number of people working on the project. Maybe you can convince your faculty advisor to take up some of the tasks. I don't know. Depends upon how well he likes you, I suppose. Right? Maybe there are that different people working on a project may have different time availability. Some people may have a really hefty course load, and so they're only available 5 to 10 hours a week. Other people may be working up to 20 hours, so you might be able to reassign some tasks to people who are able to work more, or somehow being able to increase the number of hours that people work on the project. That might, for example, consider things like spring breaks or breaks between semesters. Many times you could use those times to do full-time work on the project. That would significantly help with getting your project on schedule. All right. Any questions on that?